Welcome back, Chappelle. Welcome back to it. Welcome back to your flipped classroom and our continuing discussion of the Pax Romana. That's right, the Pax Romana, the thing that we left off talking about in class that was started by none other than this guy. That being of Augustus himself, the first true emperor of Rome. So something that we need to understand real quick before we even get back into this conversation that we left off in class is you do have a test coming up in your next class, right? You need to go ahead and bang out that study guide. By the way, when you go to check on your study guide, I'm going to highlight some stuff in red, okay? And anything highlighted in red or changed into a red color means that it's not actually on the test, okay? So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind while you're going over your study guide that if it's in red, it's not on the test, okay? So going into it, though, we left off in class talking about the reign of Augustus, the first true emperor of Rome, the grandnephew of Caesar, Julius Caesar, which actually it's really, really important that we know was never actually emperor of Rome. He was a dictator all the time. He was only a dictator, and when he was elected dictator for life, that's when he ends up getting killed. But his grandnephew, Augustus, that came to power with Mark Antony at his side as well, and then Marcus Lepidus in the second triumvirate, but Lepidus is borderline irrelevant, really. So the thing about it that we need to go into, though, a little bit more, is that we left off in class talking about the growth of Rome after Augustus, and that's that period known as the Pax Romana. So once Augustus comes to power and then eventually dies right around 17 AD, what's going to happen is a period of time known as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace. Now, Roman peace actually really only extended to Romans themselves. When you're looking at the Pax Romana, yes, it's a golden age. Yes, it's a period of progress. But a lot of it does come off the backs of the fact that the Roman military was out there conquering people. Like the Germanics, for example, in northeastern, or what is now Central Europe, or the northeastern area of the extent of the Roman Empire at the time. The Germanics now, of course, spoke German and things like that, and there were these Germanic people, or the Germanic barbarians, that Augustus actually had a huge military engagement against, and actually lost. There's a crazy story about that whole thing. One of the guys that's actually involved with is named Arminius, aka Herman the German. Now, going into it, though, that is something that happened. So Roman peace is a little bit of a loaded term, but it's considered a golden age because they were taking over so many people and they were bringing back so much money, and also there weren't any civil wars in Rome, okay? Not any huge ones anyway. Not any one of them that kind of really breaks the brain in any kind of concept. Something that we need to also understand, though, as well, the Pax Romana was defined by that period of progress. There's a famous quote about that period of progress where literally people say that Augustus found the city of Rome a city of brick and he left it a city of marble. Because he did all of these things that we talked about in class, where he passed laws, gave citizens more rights. He had, like, government buildings expanded. He had Roman baths built everywhere. He had bathrooms built everywhere. He literally had the aqueduct system expanded. The Roman Forum of Augustus was so full of treasure, apparently, you had to walk over it like y'all's dirty rooms, right? Like, so the other thing about it as well is that bad boy was built during the Pax Romana, none other than the Pantheon, right? One of the most famous buildings that of ancient Rome, made out of layer upon layer of concrete. And then this building was actually built during the Pax Romana as well, none other than the Colosseum, right? And this bad boy was actually built after Augustus had already died, right? And it's considered a true testament of the Pax Romana and the growth of Rome during this time period. The Colosseum, of course, being the large sports arena that could sit over 10,000 Romans inside of it. Massive 3 different layers of seats, and what did they all go to see? None other than gladiatorial bouts, right? Like when you could actually see the Colosseum in its full-fledged glory, it actually looked something more like this. Colosseum, oh wait, that says Colosseum. Colosseum. When it was new. All right, there we go. If we're looking literally at the Colosseum, come on, internet, you got it. All right, so if you're looking at the Colosseum when it was actually built and when it was actually constructed, you have to understand how magnificent it truly actually was. It would have had a massive sand floor to it. This is actually an exploded view of it right here, okay? It would have had 3 different layers of seats on it. Senators and wealthy people would have sat towards the lower decks. There was an apartment balcony-style area where the emperor himself would go and watch. There was a sand floor that was covered the entirety of the actual the arena itself, and you went to go watch people fight. That's the main event, right? Gladiators is what they were referred to as. Gladiators were mostly slaves that were actually brought in from different areas of the empire that would be thrown into combat into this sand where Romans could go and watch this glorious event. Now, fun fact about it that you need to understand is that Hollywood's lied to you just a tiny bit. Hollywood's lied to you because they kind of want you to think that everybody died, right? But about 25% of gladiatorial combat battles actually ended in death, okay? 25%, about 1 out of every 4. But the thing about it was it doesn't actually detract from the fact that it was still a major area and a major arena of Pax Romana life, okay? They had huge games and religious ceremonies ceremonies that took place inside the Colosseum. Other interesting facts about the Colosseum as well is just how human of a place it was in essence, and all these different cool little facets. For example, this right here is where the gladiators came in. Now, if you actually look really, really closely right here, that's actually the portal that enters into the sand table itself, or the actual floor. The gladiators actually came in from underground and were actually raised up on a stage on chains, so that literally like it was like a trap door, and they would actually come up from underneath, and the entire crowd would be cheering and freaking out. This is, of course, me being super uncomfortable and actually trying to take a picture in the Colosseum. That's another good view of the underground tunnels as well. That right there are the marble seats where the senators themselves would have sat, and this, of course, is the reconstructed sand floor that is actually in there to this day. Now, it's not the original one. Of course, the old one actually rotted out because it had a wooden base and things like that. But the other cool thing about it, speaking of that arena, is that you didn't just go to see gladiatorial combat. That was always the main event. That was the thing everybody wanted to see. But there were actually opening acts that came out before the gladiators did, like magicians. And there was also these things called beast hunts, where literally they would set up like a wild scenario with trees and rocks and stuff and release a wild animal out there and have a gladiator actually hunt it down and stuff like that. And sometimes they would even fill the Colosseum with water and have mock naval battles in it. It's absolutely wild. And these bad boys right here are really cool. They're little stoves that people would actually cook with, actually in the stands and stuff like that. And there's actually even been like graffiti found inside the Colosseum. I absolutely love talking about that building. If you want to know more about it, please let me know. I'll talk your ear off about it. I know all kinds of interesting little things about it. But the thing that we also need to understand about it as well is that not every single emperor of like the Pax Romana was a good guy, okay? Because like when you're looking at the Colosseum, the Forum of Augustus, the Pantheon, the growth of the aqueduct system, right? You're thinking to yourselves like, man, the Pax Romana was 200 years long. They must have had really great rulers that entire time. No. All right, so something that you need to understand about the emperors is they actually worked as a hereditary style format. They were dynastic, okay? They were dynasty systems that they actually had set up. For years after Augustus, Rome went through a lot of really, really good emperors and a really, really bad emperors. And since they were family dynasties like the Judo-Claudians and the Flavians, they had some really, really great ones and also some really, really bad ones, right? Like, so for example, one of the Flavians was Vespasian, who actually had the Colosseum built. Some of the really, really bad ones include these two guys. These two were the worst of the worst, right? Caligula and Nero. Leave a little bit of space next to Caligula and leave a little bit of space next to Nero and tell me or write down in your notes what you think the most awful sounding thing these people did was. To start off with, we always start off with Caligula, okay? Also known as Gaius Caesar. He is actually related to Julius Caesar himself. He's a distant cousin, all right? Now, the thing that we need to understand about Caligula, not his real name. Caligula is his nickname. It's actually what people called him behind his back, okay? Caligula is the name given to him because his father, before he ever became a Roman, like, before Caligula ever became emperor of Rome, he also became emperor of Rome at a young age. But the thing about it that you need to understand is Caligula's dad was a general, and he used to bring little baby Gaius everywhere with him. And he actually would even dress him in a little baby Roman military outfit, complete with his own set of caligas, right? Those boots with the little nails in them and stuff like that. And so everybody called him Little Boots, right? Because they're called caligas, right? Caligula, Little Boots. They referred to him as Little Boots also, though, because he was short, all right? So he was short, and he also had like a little bit of a bald spot on the top of his head. Something that you need to understand about Caligula as well, though, is that he was crazy, all right? So, like, I'm talking murderous crazy, like over-the-top crazy murderer crazy. Super, super arrogant guy. And he's considered to be one of the most violent emperors that has ever existed, on par with the next guy we'll talk about, Nero, and another guy known as Domitian as well. Caligula, though, okay, now, of course, y'all, just a heads up, these are stories told by Romans, so they could be heavily exaggerated. I actually have a book in my room called Caligula. If you would like to read it, it actually talks about, like, the concept of, like, was he really necessarily that bad? But we do know he did a lot of little wild stuff, right? For example, he was obsessed with his own image, right? Like, he had literally a golden statue of himself built and put in the, like, it had to be moved around to where the Senate met every single time, and every single day it had to be dressed in the clothes that he was wearing. His best friend was his horse, named Incitatus, right? And Incitatus in Latin means galloper. And he would have his horse completely dressed with jewels and fine jewelry that most Roman families could never afford. He loved his horse so much and hated the senators so much that he said, you know what? You guys are doing such a bad job. I'm about to make my horse a con consul, right? And he actually tried to do it for a hot second. Never actually pulled it off, but he almost wanted to make his horse a leader of Rome, right? And also, on top of everything else, he was obsessed with his own image and the idea of Alexander the Great. He said, I will walk on water. And people were like, no, you won't. So he had a bunch of boats built with a really, really flat surface, and he rode Incitatus across the water. He was like, look, I told you so. But the thing that really stands out to me about Caligula more than anything else is his murderous tendencies, right? One time, apparently, he had a huge party at his house, and he actually literally laughed in the faces of senators and said, I could kill every single one of you right now, and no one could do anything about it, right? And then another time, apparently as well, there's word on the street that he liked to watch people get sawed in half. And so much so that some Roman scholars said he liked to see people get sawed in half before he ate his meals as an appetizer. Now, I like mozzarella sticks, and I think sawing someone in half is a little aggressive. But anyway, apparently also, too, speaking of the sawing, this execution that would happen before his meals to the criminals of Rome, they would be, like, pulled upside down, legs splayed apart, and then sawed vertically, literally from where your legs separate all the way up to your neck, right? This guy is literally really over the top, and I'll tell you a couple more things about him in class, but what ends up happening to him in the long run is he gets stabbed to death by his own Praetorian guards. And then this guy is Nero. Nero is really, really famous, and for any parent that's listening to this in the background right now, you've probably heard of Nero before. Nero is that famous Roman emperor who apparently played the fiddle while Rome burned, right? And there's a famous story about him that involves the Great Fire of Rome, okay? Nero, also being kind of crazy, had a lot of weird backstory stuff. Like, he hated his mom, murdered his own mother by kicking her to death and stuff like that. Also, there was this whole thing that involved a birthday gift and a collapsing boat, but we'll talk about that in class as well. But killed his own mom when he kicked her to death and stuff like that. And on top of everything else, Nero blamed a massive fire that actually happened in Rome. So this fire did occur, the one they say that he played the fiddle while Rome burned. The fire did actually happen, okay? Now, the thing about it is people tried to always act, or scholars at the time tried to act like Nero didn't care, right? That he's like, oh, mindlessly playing the fiddle while Rome burned. He actually did send a lot of money and fire crews there to actually try to get the fire put out, but the big key thing about it is who did he blame it on? And he actually blamed it on Christians. Something that y'all need to understand really quickly is that by the time these guys have come to power, Augustus died in 17 BC, right? These dudes all died in the ADs. So, like, these guys actually were alive after Christ was crucified and Christianity was beginning to spread. And so he blamed the Great Fire of Rome on Christians, right? And he said, oh, it's those disgusting Christians that are going against the Roman religion, that it's all their fault. And so he had people executed in mass numbers. He had Christians executed in mass numbers. He had them murdered and executed during plays. Like, if, for example, during a Roman play, if an actor or if a character in the play was supposed to die, he would actually have the person murdered live on stage, but it was a Christian dressed up as the character, right? And then on top of everything else, where the fire actually burned down everything, he actually had a huge park for himself built because he loved to read and stuff like that, and he loved to walk through parks and look at poetry and music and stuff like that. And the thing about it, though, is, as well, interesting little fact, is apparently one of his favorite times to read was at night. But how are you supposed to read at night with no light, okay? Well, they say that Nero would apparently have Christians put on sticks with hay padded around them and have them lit on fire, and he would read beneath them while they burned alive, right? Now that's absolutely crazy, wild, and honestly over the top, right? Okay, so Nero, though, apparently made so many people upset that his own military gave him a shovel one day, had him dig his own grave, and then he stabbed himself in the neck and killed himself because nobody liked him very much. There are lots of other ones, too. That's Commodus right there, who's the gladiator emperor who was drowned to death by his wrestling coach. And then this one right here is Caracalla, who was stabbed in the back while he was peeing at the side of the road, all right? So, like, there's a lot of crazy Roman emperors. But interestingly enough, Pax Romana ended with 5 really, really good ones, right? 5 really, really great ones in general. Now, some of those guys actually weren't even from the Pax Romana. They actually came after these guys. Like Commodus, for example, is the son of Marcus Aurelius. But the thing about it is, it's the last thing you'll need to know for your test, is the 5 good emperors of Rome, right? Now, 5 good emperors brought Rome to their absolute peak and their height right around 117 AD, right? Okay, now 117 AD isn't going to be a crazy important year, but it's kind of just an important year to know that that's when, though, of course, Rome got to its absolute biggest under the rulership of Marcus Aurelius, Trajan, Nerva, Hadrian, and Pius, right? The 5 good emperors of the Pax Romana came along, and the thing about it is they had 5 emperors back to back that were not like Caligula and not like Nero. They weren't trying to make their horse a senator. They weren't sawing people in half. They weren't lighting Christians on fire, right? So like now, well, they probably did some, but not a lot. All right, so like now the thing about it is Nerva was the very, very first one who just honestly just didn't screw up. All right, so like Nerva came into power after some very, very tumultuous times in Roman history. He came along after the year of 4 emperors, and he just brought peace to everything, and he just didn't mess up and managed to keep a peaceful slate. Trajan was a really, really big one, who's very, very important because he brought Rome to the largest size that it ever was, and he had a very famous column built, actually, because of this, known as Trajan's Column, right? And Trajan's Column was meant to celebrate the height and the growth of Rome at the time. Now, funny little fact about it is Marcus Aurelius, the 5th guy right here, actually had his own column built, and he was just built a little bit bigger than Trajan's as well. Now, Hadrian is a very important one. He will be in the matching section on your test. He is one of the 5 good emperors, and he's very, very well known for organizing the bureaucratic system of Rome, making taxation much more organized and much more efficient. And he also built a huge wall that still stands in the middle of what is now known as England to this day. And it's known as Hadrian's Wall. And what it was meant to do was actually kind of just set a limit to Rome and be like, look, y'all, we're going this far, because if we get any further than this, we're going to start getting very, very weak, and we're going to be like a house of cards, and we're going to come tumbling down in on ourselves. So Hadrian's Wall, one of my top 10 favorite places I love in history, and I got to go there before I die. I cannot wait. He organized that bureaucratic system and built Hadrian's Wall and kind of set a limit to the Roman area. Pius came in and he just had an area of peace where he did not worry about conquest. He worried about trying to keep Rome more organized. But the most famous of all of the 5 good emperors is that being of Marcus Aurelius, the Roman philosopher king, and he was a Stoic philosopher. Marcus Aurelius came to power and believed in the ideas that he should not be out for personal gain, wealth, finances, or fame. He should be there only to learn as much as he possibly can and be as good of a king to the Roman people as possible. He took over the Germanics as well and brought Rome as peace in the east as well after he did this entire conquest of the Germanic people, and his son would later on come to power after him, a man by the name of Commodus, who was actually absolutely crazy, and he's also the subject and the villain of the famous Gladiator movie by Ridley Scott, which is a really, really good movie. It's one of my all-time favorites, right? But Marcus Aurelius is your very last one, and I'll tell you a couple other little cool facts about him as well in class right before we take your test, but you just need to know him as the Roman philosopher king and the last of the 5 good emperors. But the thing about it is very, very last, but very, very not least, Marcus Aurelius does come to power, ends off the 5 good emperors. But just because you have 5 good emperors doesn't mean that the fall is not coming. And to start the next unit, we will begin with the fall of Rome and how it crumbled in on itself, leading to the medieval period. So y'all go ahead and study, get some good work done, but I'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one.